It's been 6 months since we laid Emily to rest. 6 months of mornings that feel heavier than the nights and silence that doesn't just fill the house. It consumes it. Every day feels like wading through quicksand, trying to find footing in a world without her. Emily wasn't just my wife. She was my everything. My partner, my confidant, my reason to come home every day. For 25 years, we built a life together. Raised our 2 kids, shared quiet evenings on the porch, and navigated the ups and downs that come with a long marriage. I thought we were unshakable. I thought I knew her as well as I knew myself. Then I found the box. It was an unremarkable chest, one of those old wooden ones that look like they belong in a grandparent's attic. And for as long as I could remember, that's where it had been, in the attic, tucked away in the corner beneath old blankets and forgotten Christmas decorations. I never paid it much attention. Emily had always said it was full of her childhood keepsakes. Old photos, letters from friends, little mementos of a life before us. She was oddly protective of it, though. Anytime I went near it, even jokingly, she'd deflect with a laugh and say, "That's my little time capsule. Let's leave it buried." It became one of those quirks I loved about her, one of the many small mysteries I never pressed her to explain. But grief does strange things to a person. On a rainy Saturday afternoon, with the kids busy in their own lives and the house feeling too large, I found myself wandering the attic. I was searching for something, though I couldn't have told you what. Maybe a piece of her. Something tangible to hold onto in the face of the ever-widening void she left behind. When I stumbled across the chest, something inside me stirred. A mix of curiosity and desperation. I wanted to see her handwriting, smell the scent of her favorite perfume lingering on an old scarf, find anything that could make me feel close to her again. I hesitated for a moment, my hand resting on the lid. Felt almost wrong, like I was violating a trust. But she was gone. Whatever secrets that box held, she'd taken them with her, or so I thought. The lid creaked open, revealing what I expected at first. Old photographs of her as a little girl, a bundle of postcards, a few ticket stubs from concerts she went to in her 20s. Then I noticed an envelope tucked at the very bottom, hidden beneath the layers of nostalgia. It wasn't marked with a date or a name, but the handwriting was unmistakably hers. My heart started to race, my fingers trembling as I picked it up. The paper felt fragile, as if the weight of its words had worn it thin. I unfolded it carefully, the faint smell of the attic dust mixing with the faintest trace of her lavender perfume. The first line struck me like a punch to the gut. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and I owe you the truth." I read the line 3 times before the meaning sank in. The truth? About what? My mind reeled, grasping at straws, trying to rationalize why Emily would feel the need to leave me a posthumous confession. The letter was long, several pages folded neatly together. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the paper still. I wanted to stop, to put it back in the box and pretend I'd never seen it. But something stronger kept me rooted in place, unable to look away from the words she'd written. The truth was about to unravel everything I thought I knew about my wife, about us, about our life together. And in that moment, I didn't know if I was ready to face it. For a long moment, I just stood there, clutching the letter like it might disintegrate if I gripped it too tightly. The attic around me felt darker, heavier. A single bulb hung overhead, swaying slightly in the draft, casting shadows that danced like ghosts across the old rafters. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. How could a simple piece of paper make the world feel so unsteady? Finally, I forced myself to sit down on an old trunk nearby, my knees too weak to support me any longer. I unfolded the first page, its creases deep, as though Emily had read and refolded 100 times before sealing it away. The next line made my stomach twist. "I hope you can forgive me." Forgive her? For what? My mind ran through every possibility, but none of them landed. Emily was the kind of woman who would apologize for bumping into furniture. Was this a letter about something minor? Some mistake she thought she'd taken to the grave? Or was it something bigger, something that would explain why my chest felt like it was collapsing? I scanned the next few lines, unable to slow down, like ripping off a bandage. You deserve the truth about who I was, who I am, and what I did. I kept this from you not because I didn't love you, but because I loved you too much. You see, our life together, our family, it was built on a lie. A lie. Those words hit me like a sledgehammer. Every memory, every shared moment. Was she saying it was all tainted? I clenched the letter so hard it crinkled in my hands. Built on a lie, I murmured, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. My mind raced back through our years together, grasping at moments, trying to find the fracture she was talking about. Was it something from the early days? I thought about the first time I saw her, walking into that coffee shop with her hair pulled back, wearing that red coat that made her look like she just stepped out of a painting. She'd smiled at me like she already knew me, and maybe she did. Maybe I'd been the fool in all this, blind to the cracks beneath the surface. I turned back to the letter, reading the next part carefully, even as my hands shook. When we first met, I wasn't the person you thought I was. There was someone else in my life, someone who shaped the choices I made, the paths I took. When I chose you, it wasn't as clean or as simple as I made it seem. I told myself I could leave it behind, that we could start fresh. And for a while I believed it. But secrets have a way of clinging to you, don't they? Even when you think you've buried them deep enough to forget. There it was, the first thread. Someone else. My heart sank as I thought about what that might mean. Was she talking about an old boyfriend? A lover? A fiancé? She'd never mentioned anyone serious before me, just a string of casual dates that went nowhere. I had never pressed her about her past, because why would I? We had built a life together, built a family. Was that what she meant by a lie? That she had started our relationship while still entangled with someone else? I wanted to stop reading, to shove the letter back into the box and pretend I'd never found it. But I couldn't. The truth had its claws in me now, and it wasn't going to let go. I want you to know that what we had was real. Whatever you think of me after reading this, please don't doubt that. I loved you, more than I ever thought I could love anyone. But there are things I did, things I never told you. And I know you'll hate me for them. I wouldn't blame you if you did. Hate her? The word felt foreign, impossible. I couldn't hate Emily. Even now, with my stomach churning and my mind reeling, I couldn't imagine feeling anything but love for her. But then again, I didn't know the full truth yet. I looked down at the next page, her words waiting like a loaded gun. My eyes flicked to the box, wondering what other secrets it held. I couldn't face it all at once, but I had to know. I had to keep going. And so I turned the page. I stared at the second page for what felt like hours before I could bring myself to read it. The attic was stifling, the air thick with dust and memories, but I barely noticed. All I could focus on were Emily's words, each one feeling like it carried the weight of a stone tied around my chest. There's no easy way to say this, so I won't try to soften it. Before I met you, there was someone else. His name was Daniel. Daniel. The name rang hollow, like a foreign object that didn't belong in the story of my life. Emily had never mentioned a Daniel. Sure, there had been vague allusions to a couple of old boyfriends when we were first dating, but never anyone important enough to warrant a name. We were together for 5 years, and for a long time I thought he was it for me. We had plans to get married, to move away from the city and start fresh. But Daniel, he wasn't the man I thought he was. He lied to me, betrayed me, hurt me in ways I still can't put into words. By the time I found out the truth, it was too late. I'd already made decisions I couldn't undo, choices I'll carry with me forever. What kind of betrayal was she talking about? Infidelity? Emotional manipulation? Abuse? My mind spun with possibilities, each one worse than the last. But even as I wrestled with my own shock, a small part of me felt something else. A twinge of compassion. Whatever she had gone through, it had clearly shaped her. And yet, she had never let it define the life we built together. Or so I had thought. When I met you, I was at my lowest. I just ended things with Daniel and I was a mess. You were everything he wasn't: kind, steady, genuine. You didn't play games, and you didn't make me feel like I had to prove my worth. I clung to that, to you, like a lifeline. But I wasn't honest with you, not about the baggage I was carrying or the consequences of my time with Daniel. I told myself that if I could just move on, If I could build a new life with you, I could leave all of it behind. The knot in my stomach tightened. What consequences? Was this about emotional scars? Or was it something more tangible? More permanent? I turned the page, the paper trembling in my hands. There's no way to sugarcoat this, so I won't. When I met you, I was pregnant. The words slammed into me like a freight train. Pregnant. Pregnant when we met? My mind raced, darting back to those early days. Our first dates, the way she'd seemed almost too perfect, too eager to leave her past behind. Had I missed something? I didn't know what to do. I didn't even know for sure if the baby was Daniel's. But I was terrified, and I didn't feel like I could raise a child on my own. When I met you, you seemed like a fresh start, a way out of the chaos my life had become. I made the decision to terminate the pregnancy before things got serious between us. I told myself it was for the best, for me, for the baby, for us. But it's a decision I've never stopped regretting. My chest felt like it was being crushed under the weight of her words. Terminated. The clinical finality of it hit me harder than I expected. She'd made a choice, one she had every right to make. But it was a choice she'd kept hidden from me all these years. And yet, it wasn't the pregnancy or the termination that shook me the most. It was the fact that she had never told me. Not when we were dating, not when we got married, not during all the years we spent raising our own children together. She had carried this secret for decades, locking it away in a box, both literally and figuratively, and never once let me see even a glimpse of it. I've spent years trying to bury this part of myself, to focus on the life we built together instead of the life I left behind. But now that I'm gone, I can't bear the thought of you finding out some other way, or worse, never knowing at all. You deserve the truth, even if it makes you hate me. Hate her. The word felt foreign and impossible. How could I hate Emily? But the truth was, I didn't know what I felt. Betrayed? Confused? Angry? Yes, all of those. But there was something else, too. Something deeper and more painful. Grief. Not just for her, but for the life I thought we had. The life that now felt like it had been built on a foundation of cracks I had never seen. I folded the letter and set it aside, staring at the box that still held the weight of her secrets. There was more pages, more revelations, but I didn't know if I could take any more tonight. The past had already begun unraveling, and I wasn't sure I was ready to see just how far the threads would go. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the folded letter in my lap and the chest beside me. My mind churned, trying to reconcile the woman I had loved for over 2 decades with the one revealed in these pages. The more I tried to make sense of it, the more questions bubbled to the surface, each more unsettling than the last. Who was Daniel, really? What had he done to her that left such deep scars? And why had Emily hidden all of this from me? I looked down at the remaining pages in the letter, still neatly folded in a stack. My hands shook as I reached for the next one, but I hesitated. Did I even want to know more? Did I have the strength to keep pulling at this thread, knowing it might unravel everything I thought I knew about my wife and our life together? But the box was open now. There was no turning back. The next page was shorter, as if Emily had struggled to find the words. I know you must have so many questions. I wish I could answer them all, but there's only so much I can say in a letter. What I need you to know, what I need you to believe is that you saved me. Even with all the lies, all the secrets, you gave me a life I never thought I could have. You gave me safety. You gave me love. I stopped, letting the words sink in. Safety. Love. Those were things I had always tried to give her, but now they felt tainted. Was it really love if it was built on lies? Was it safety if she never felt safe enough to tell me the truth? The next line hit me harder than I expected. But there's one more thing I need to tell you, and it's the hardest thing of all. It's about Daniel. My breath caught in my throat. I thought I had braced myself for whatever came next, but nothing could have prepared me for what I read next. Daniel never really left my life. The words blurred as my vision swam. I had to read the line again, slowly, to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. He never left? What did that mean? He disappeared for a while after we broke up, but a few years into our marriage, he found me again. At first, it was just phone calls, emails. He wanted to apologize, to explain himself. I should have shut it down right then and there, but I didn't. Part of me was still afraid of him, and part of me wanted closure. Closure. The word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. What kind of closure? And why hadn't she told me? It wasn't until much later that I realized he didn't want closure, he wanted control. That's what it was always about with Daniel. Control. He knew just what strings to pull, just how to make me feel like I couldn't escape him. Even after all those years, he still had a hold on me. I felt my hands clenching into fists, crumpling the paper slightly before I forced myself to let go. The idea of someone holding that kind of power over Emily, even after everything she had built with me, made my blood boil. He came back into our lives more than once. Always uninvited, always when I least expected it. Sometimes he'd threaten to tell you about us, to destroy the life I'd built with you. Other times, he'd act like he just wanted to catch up, as if we were old friends. I thought about telling you so many times, but I was terrified. Terrified of what you'd think of me, of what you'd do to him. Terrified of losing you. The room felt like it was closing in around me. My heart pounded in my chest as I thought about all the years we'd spent together. All the moments that now seemed tainted by the shadow of this man I had never known existed. I tried to think back, to remember any signs I might have missed. Had there been moments when Emily seemed distant, distracted? Times when her mood had shifted without explanation? I couldn't think of anything concrete, but now I wasn't sure if that was because she had hidden it so well or because I hadn't been paying close enough attention. He's gone now. That's one of the only reasons I feel like I can finally tell you all of this. I need you to know that I never let him take away what we had. Whatever hold he had on me, it wasn't stronger than the love I had for you. I fought for us, even if you never knew it. I set the page down and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes, trying to push back the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Anger, hurt, confusion, and underneath it all, a creeping sense of betrayal that I didn't want to admit was there. I looked at the chest again, its contents still spilling out like secrets that refused to stay buried. There were more pages, more truths waiting to be uncovered. But for the first time since I'd opened it, I wasn't sure I wanted to keep going. Because deep down I knew this wasn't the worst of it. The house was unbearably quiet when I finally moved from the attic. The chest stayed where it was, gaping open like a wound, the remaining pages of Emily's letter resting inside. I couldn't bring myself to carry them downstairs. Not yet. My hands felt too heavy, my breath too shallow. Instead, I found myself in the kitchen, staring blankly at the coffee maker as it sputtered and hissed. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, highlighting the dust particles dancing in the air, but it felt dim, lifeless. Daniel. The name circled my thoughts like a vulture, picking apart every memory, every certainty I had about my life with Emily. I couldn't stop replaying her words. He never really left my life. I wanted to be angry, furious even, but all I felt was this hollow ache. Why hadn't she told me? Why had she carried that burden alone? Let it fester like an infection she thought she could contain. And what did she mean by, he's gone now? I thought back to the times she'd seemed distant, like her mind was somewhere else. At the time, I'd written it off to the usual stresses of life. Work, kids, the relentless demands of running a household. Now, I wondered how many of those moments were really about him. The coffee pot beeped, snapping me out of my thoughts. I poured a cup, though I didn't feel like drinking it. It was something to hold, something to do with my hands. My gaze wandered to the family photos on the wall. There she was, smiling back at me from a dozen different frames. Our wedding day, the kids' first day of school, a lazy Sunday picnic by the lake. Her laughter seemed frozen in those pictures. A cruel reminder of the life I thought we'd built together. A life that now felt riddled with cracks. I couldn't take it anymore. I set the coffee down and headed back to the attic. The letter wasn't going to read itself, and I couldn't bear the weight of the unknown any longer. When I reached the chest, I noticed something I'd missed before. A smaller envelope, tucked beneath the remaining pages of her letter. It wasn't sealed, and the handwriting on the front was unfamiliar. Daniel, it read. My chest tightened. This wasn't just a letter about him. This was a letter to him. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the envelope. Did I have the right to open it? Emily had written this with him in mind, not me. But then again, she'd hidden it in our house, in the box she must have known I'd find eventually. My curiosity won out. I slid the letter from the envelope and unfolded it, bracing myself for whatever I was about to discover. Daniel, it began. I never wanted to write this, but you've left me no choice. You need to understand that this is the last time I will ever acknowledge you. The last time I will let you have any hold over me or my life. You think you own me, but you don't. Not anymore. My grip tightened on the paper. Already, her words felt heavier than anything I'd read before. You've done enough damage, not just to me, but to the people I care about. You don't get to barge into my life whenever you feel like it and throw everything into chaos. I've tried to be civil, to let you go your way while I go mine, but you keep finding ways to pull me back into your orbit. I won't let you do it anymore. I won't let you take away the life I've worked so hard to build. The words were sharp, resolute, but I could sense the fear beneath them. Emily had been afraid of him. Even after all these years, after building a life with me, she had still felt the weight of his presence. I'm happy now, the letter continued. I have a husband who loves me, children who bring me more joy than I ever thought possible. I won't let you ruin that. If you ever cared about me even a little, you'll leave us alone. You'll stay away from me, from my family, from everything I've built. There was no closing line, no goodbye or sincerely, just a firm, final statement of her boundaries. But it didn't feel like enough. I stared at the letter, my mind spinning. Had he listened? Had he respected her wishes? Or had something else happened to make him gone? And if he hadn't left willingly, a chill ran through me. I looked back at the chest, at the pages of Emily's confession still waiting for me. Somehow, I knew I was only scratching the surface of what she had hidden. But the deeper I dug, the darker it seemed to get. I folded Daniel's letter and set it aside, but its words lingered, pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. Emily's voice echoed in my head, her desperation, her determination to protect the life she'd built with me. Yet the question burned in my mind. Why now? Why did she finally feel safe enough to write this letter to me? And what did she mean when she said he was gone? I glanced back at the remaining pages of her confession. The answers were there, waiting for me, but I hesitated. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the fall would be long and hard, but unable to step away. Finally, I reached for the next page. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that writing to Daniel was enough to make him go away. But it wasn't. He came back one last time. My heart raced as I read those words, my grip tightening on the page. It was the summer before Abby graduated high school. You probably don't remember, but I went to visit my sister that weekend. At least, that's what I told you. I froze. My mind raced back to that summer. Emily had packed her bags and left on a Friday afternoon, saying she needed some girl time with her sister Megan. I hadn't thought much of it. Megan lived a few hours away, and Emily deserved a break from the chaos of raising teenagers. But now, that memory felt tainted, like a picture with cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. I didn't go to Megan's, the letter continued. Daniel called me out of the blue. He said he was in town, that he needed to see me. He sounded desperate. I told him no, that there was nothing left to say, but he wouldn't listen. He kept calling, leaving messages, threatening to come to the house if I didn't meet him. I felt a surge of anger flare in my chest. The thought of this man, this stranger, threatening my family, my home, made my blood boil. I couldn't let him show up at our door. I couldn't let the kids see him or let you find out that way. So I agreed to meet him. I told myself it would be the last time. My breath caught as the words blurred for a moment. She had met him. She had gone to him, lied to me, and kept it all hidden. We met at a park on the edge of town. I thought it would be public enough to feel safe. But as soon as I saw him, I realized how wrong I was. He was different, hollowed out, angry, like a man with nothing left to lose. He told me he'd lost his job, that his wife had left him, that his life was falling apart. And he blamed me for all of it. The page trembled in my hands. Every instinct in me screamed that she should have called me, should have let me handle it. But she hadn't. She'd faced him alone. He kept saying it was my fault, that if I'd stayed with him, his life wouldn't have fallen apart. He said he still loved me, that he couldn't move on because he knew we were meant to be together. I told him to stop, that it was over, that it had been over for years. But he wouldn't listen. I could see it in my mind. Emily standing there, trying to reason with a man who had lost all reason. My stomach churned at the thought. He grabbed my arm at one point, tried to pull me closer. I pulled away, told him I'd call the police if he didn't leave. That's when he snapped. He started yelling, saying he'd make sure you knew everything, that he'd destroy the life I'd built with you just like I'd destroyed his. My fists clenched. The thought of anyone laying a hand on Emily made my blood run cold. I walked away, but I felt his eyes on me the entire time. I didn't stop shaking until I was halfway home. That was the last time I saw him. I don't know what happened to him after that. Maybe he finally gave up. Maybe he moved on. All I know is, he hasn't tried to contact me since. The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. But something about them didn't sit right. If Daniel had truly disappeared, why had Emily felt the need to confess everything now? I set the page down and stared at the chest. Somewhere in its depths, the rest of the truth was waiting. But for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to know. Because deep down, I had a feeling that Daniel's disappearance wasn't as simple as Emily wanted me to believe. I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily was holding something back, even from the grave. The way she described that last encounter with Daniel, how it ended so abruptly, with no clear resolution, it left a hollow ache in my chest. It wasn't like her to leave loose ends. Not when she knew how much those threads could unravel the life we'd built together. I sat there, staring at the chest, the rest of her confession waiting like a coiled serpent. Every instinct told me to leave it alone, to close the lid and pretend I hadn't seen any of it. But I couldn't. I'd already come too far. Reaching into the chest, I grabbed the next page and unfolded it. I've tried to make peace with what happened that day, but I can't shake the feeling that something's missing. I know it sounds crazy, but I've spent years waiting for the other shoe to drop. Even now, as I write this, there's a part of me that wonders if Daniel will resurface, if he'll find a way to destroy everything I've worked so hard to protect. Her words felt like a hand squeezing my chest. Emily had lived in fear of this man, of the power he held over her, of the chaos he might bring. And she had borne it all in silence, never letting me see even a glimpse of the storm raging inside her. I thought about telling you so many times, but I couldn't bear the thought of what it might do to you, to us. You've always been my safe place, my steady ground. I didn't want to ruin that. I didn't want to ruin you. I stopped, my jaw tightening. Did she really think I couldn't handle the truth? That I wasn't strong enough to stand by her, to protect her from this man who had haunted her for so long? But even as I felt anger bubbling up, I couldn't ignore the flicker of doubt creeping in. Maybe she was right. Maybe knowing the truth would have changed everything. Not just for me, but for us, for our family. I turned the page, my hands trembling. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And Daniel hasn't come back. Maybe he's finally moved on. Or maybe something else happened to him, something I don't know about. I've spent years trying not to think about it, trying to push it all away. But now that I'm not here to carry it anymore, I need you to know the truth. I need you to understand why I did what I did. What she did. The phrase sent a chill down my spine. What was she about to tell me? There's something I never told you, something I hoped I'd never have to. That day in the park, after I left Daniel, I called someone. Someone I trusted. Someone who knew how to handle situations like this. My breath caught. Who did she call? I told myself it was just for advice. Just to figure out what to do if Daniel ever came back. But the more I talked, the more desperate I felt. I didn't know how to keep him out of my life, out of our lives. I didn't know how to protect what we'd built without you finding out about everything. So I asked for help. Real help. My chest tightened. Real help. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications I didn't want to face. I don't know what they did, or how they did it. All I know is, a week later Daniel was gone. Completely gone. No calls, no letters, no surprise visits. It was like he vanished into thin air. The page blurred as my mind raced, trying to process what I was reading. Emily had called someone who had made Daniel disappear. Who? And at what cost? I've spent years trying to convince myself that it was just a coincidence, that maybe Daniel finally decided to move on. But deep down, I know better. I don't know exactly what happened to him, and maybe it's better that I don't. All I know is he's gone. And I don't regret it. I set the page down, my hands shaking. Emily's words echoed in my mind. I don't regret it. She knew. She knew what had happened to Daniel, even if she didn't say it outright. And now I was left to pick up the pieces, to face the ghost she had tried so hard to bury. The house felt impossibly quiet as I sat there, the weight of her confession pressing down on me like a lead blanket. There were still more pages to read, still more truths waiting to be uncovered. But I already knew one thing for sure. My wife, the woman I had loved for over 2 decades, had been hiding more than secrets. She had been hiding a crime. I couldn't stop the tremor in my hands as I folded the page, the weight of Emily's confession settling heavily in my chest. A crime. The word felt strange in my mouth, like a foreign language I didn't understand. How could she have been involved in something like that? The woman I thought I knew so well, the woman who had held me when I cried, who had smiled at me across the dinner table for 25 years. Could she really have had a hand in something as dark as this? I felt like I was drowning in the silence of the room. The walls seemed to close in, pressing down on me with every passing second. For the first time, I wasn't sure I even knew who she was. The next page in the chest seemed to taunt me, but I knew I had to read it. The rest of the truth was out there, just beyond my reach. And maybe, just maybe, it would help me understand why Emily had made the choices she did. I reached for the next page, my pulse quickening as I unfolded it. I'm not proud of what I did, and I know you won't forgive me for it, but I need you to understand that I did it out of desperation, out of fear. Daniel had his claws in me, and I didn't know how to get rid of him. He knew my weaknesses, my fears, and he used them against me. I felt trapped, like I had no way out. I felt my breath catch in my throat. The vulnerability in her words was almost unbearable. Emily, my Emily, had felt trapped? How could I have missed that? I reached out to someone I knew in my past, someone who had a reputation for making problems disappear. I won't name names because I don't want to drag you into this any more than I already have. But you know the kind of people I'm talking about. People who work in the shadows, who don't ask questions and don't care about the consequences. I could feel my stomach twist as I read on. This wasn't just a simple favor. Emily had turned to someone dangerous, someone who deals with problems in a way that leaves no trace. I made the call, told them everything. About Daniel, about how he was threatening our family, about how I was scared of what he might do if he kept coming around. They assured me that they could handle it, that they'd take care of it. I thought I was protecting you, protecting all of us. It was like a knot in my chest had grown tighter with every word. She had turned to them, to someone who had taken care of Daniel. She hadn't just faced him herself. She'd involved people who dealt with situations permanently. A week later, I got a call. It was brief, but it was enough. Daniel had been dealt with. He was gone.
No trace, no witnesses.
He wouldn't be a problem anymore, and I could finally breathe again. I set the page down, feeling like I had been punched in the gut. Gone. That was all it took for her to breathe again, for her to feel safe. And I had no idea. I could see it now, the pieces of our life together, all the moments I thought we had shared, now stained by a decision Emily had made without me. I could almost hear her breathing easier when she thought it was over. But it wasn't over for me. I wasn't sure I could process any more. I had already learned more than I'd ever wanted to know. My mind raced as I tried to fit the fragments of this new version of Emily into the woman I had known. I loved her. I still loved her. But how could I continue to love a woman who had done something like this? Then I noticed something. A small detail at the bottom of the page I had almost missed. I know this may sound unbelievable, but please believe me when I say that I had no choice. If I had to do it all over again, I would have handled it differently. But Daniel had made it clear that he would never stop. He would have destroyed everything we had. And I couldn't let that happen. A faint sliver of sympathy began to crack through the anger. I knew Daniel had been a threat to her, to us. I remembered her fear when she talked about him. And yet, a part of me couldn't help but ask, was there ever another way? The final line of the letter struck me like a slap. I hope that someday when you're ready you'll understand why I did this. But if not, if this is the final goodbye between us, then I understand. Just know that I loved you. I loved you more than you'll ever know. I couldn't hold the paper any longer. It slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor, as if Emily's words were too heavy for me to carry any longer. I stared at the letter, at the confession of a woman I thought I knew, of a wife who had kept her darkest secret hidden for all these years. I thought I understood what she had done. But the truth, the full truth, was too much for me to bear. Emily's love had been real, but it was built on lies, on fear, on choices that had been made in the shadows. And now I had to figure out what that meant for me. The silence in the house felt deafening as I sat there, the weight of her confession pressing down on me. And for the first time I realized something. The past wasn't just gone. It was still here, in the walls of this house, in the decisions we'd made, in the lies we'd lived. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the pile of paper scattered on the floor. Emily's words were etched into my mind, each line a dagger I couldn't pull out. I loved you more than you'll ever know. Could love really be built on such a foundation of lies, of fear and manipulation? Did it mean anything at all, or had it all been a carefully crafted illusion? My mind felt fractured. One part of me, my heart maybe, wanted to understand, wanted to believe that the woman I loved had made these decisions out of desperation, out of a twisted sense of protection. But another part of me, the one that had been left in the wake of her betrayal, screamed that there was no justification for what she had done. I thought about Daniel. I thought about him lurking in the shadows of our life, and how Emily had tried to erase him, to bury him so deep that even I couldn't see the scars. The thought of him still chilled me. He had never been just a shadow, he was a presence, a reminder of a version of my wife that I never knew. But that wasn't all. No, what really twisted the knife was the idea that someone Emily had called, had made Daniel disappear. She had said she didn't regret it, but I couldn't shake the sense that she hadn't really been honest with me. If she'd truly gotten rid of him, why didn't she tell me everything? Why hadn't she trusted me to help her, to face him together? Instead, she had kept it hidden, swept it under the rug like something so vile it couldn't be shared. I looked down at the letter one last time. There was no more to read, no more words to unravel. But in a way, the story wasn't finished. The chapter with Emily was closed, but the questions about what she had done, who she had become, still echoed in the silence. I couldn't keep pretending that the life we'd lived was real. The foundation had cracked, and now the question was, could I ever put it back together? I didn't know if I had the strength, but I knew one thing for certain. I needed to confront this. I couldn't live in this limbo, forever wondering what had really happened. Emily had kept the truth from me for so long, but I was done living in the dark. I grabbed my coat and left the house. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay there anymore. Not with the echoes of her confession still hanging in the air. I needed answers, and if that meant facing the ghosts of her past, of our past, then that's exactly what I would do. I ended up at the park where she and Daniel had met all those years ago. The quiet surroundings, the fading light of the setting sun. It should have been peaceful, but my mind refused to quiet. I walked aimlessly, trying to piece together what I'd learned. He was gone, Emily had written, gone. But something about her words didn't sit right. I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over. The idea that Daniel had simply disappeared after all the damage he'd caused didn't make sense. I took out my phone, scrolling to Megan's name. Emily's sister had always been close to her, and if anyone knew something more about her past with Daniel, it would be Megan. I hesitated, but my need for answers overwhelmed any lingering doubts. I dialed. The phone rang twice before she picked up. "Megan," I said, keeping my voice steady. I need to talk to you. About Emily. There was a pause on the other end, as if she had been expecting this. Mark? What's going on? I found something. About Daniel. About what Emily did. Her voice shifted. I thought this day might come. What do you want to know? I felt the gravity of her words as she spoke, and the anxiety that had been building in me all afternoon intensified. I need to know the truth. About Daniel. What really happened? Megan took a deep breath, and I could hear the weight of what she was about to say. Mark, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but Emily didn't want you to know. She never wanted to burden you with it. I need to know, Megan. Now. Okay. Her voice lowered. Daniel wasn't just some ex. He became obsessed with Emily. He started showing up, making threats, physical ones. He hurt her, Mark. There were times when she was scared to leave the house. My blood ran cold. I'd never known. But why didn't she tell me? I whispered. Megan's voice softened. Because she didn't want to drag you into it. She thought it was her battle to fight alone. She never wanted you to worry. I was shaking now, the horror of what I was hearing sinking in. And what about the disappearance? Did you help her make him go away? Another heavy pause. She didn't want to tell you, but she called someone. People she knew from her past. They took care of it. Daniel was never going to leave her alone. He was dangerous. I felt sick. And he's really gone? Yes, Mark. He's gone. Emily never looked back. I didn't know what to say. It was too much. Why didn't she tell me this? Why keep it a secret all these years? Because she thought it was for the best. She loved you too much to make you part of it. The truth was too much to process. I need to go, I said. I need some time to think. I understand. Just take care of yourself, Mark. I hung up, my head spinning. Daniel was gone. But Emily's secret was still here, haunting me. I didn't know how to move forward. I stood still, staring out at the park as the world around me seemed to blur. The air felt colder now, and the weight of Megan's words was heavy in my chest. Emily had lied to me, kept me in the dark about everything, about Daniel, about how far she'd gone to protect me, and about the people she had involved to make him disappear. I had spent 25 years building a life with her, and now I realized that everything I thought I knew was built on a foundation of secrets. I couldn't stay in the park any longer. I needed to face this. I needed to confront the ghost of Emily's past, and somehow find a way to move forward. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, but I had to at least understand why. I went back to the house, the place that now felt more like a museum of memories than a home. Every room, every corner was filled with her. Her laughter, her love, her warmth. And yet, beneath it all, there was this ugly truth that I couldn't shake. I found the journal where I remembered it being, right under the drawer's lip, half hidden by the dust that had accumulated over the months. My hands shook as I pulled it out, the familiar leather binding somehow comforting yet terrifying at the same time. Flipping it open, I scanned the pages, looking for anything that could explain her decisions, her choices. What I found was far more than I bargained for. The first few entries were mundane. Daily thoughts about the kids, small moments that made up our life together. But as I went further, the tone changed. It became darker, more troubled. Emily had written about her growing anxiety, her fear of Daniel showing up again. It was as if, deep down, she had always known that the past wouldn't stay buried. One entry in particular stood out. He called today. I didn't pick up. I know it's him. The texts are getting worse. He's threatening to ruin everything. He wants me back. I don't know how much longer I can do this.
I'm scared.
If I tell Mark, it'll destroy him. But what if Daniel really does come here? What if he hurts us? I don't know what to do anymore. I closed the journal for a moment, my hands trembling. It was clear now. Emily had felt cornered. Trapped between a past she couldn't escape and a future she wanted to protect at all costs. She hadn't just kept secrets from me. She'd kept them to shield me from a danger she couldn't face alone. And now, as I sat there in our bedroom, I wondered if I could ever forgive myself for not seeing the pain she was hiding. But more importantly, I had to ask myself, Could I move forward from this? Could I rebuild our life, or had the damage already been done? The answers weren't clear. But one thing was, I couldn't keep living in the past. I sat there for hours, the journal still open in front of me, but the words blurred. They felt like a different life, one that no longer seemed connected to the person I'd shared my world with. I could still hear Emily's voice in my mind, soft and reassuring, as if she were standing beside me. But the more I read, the more I realized that the woman I thought I knew had lived a life full of shadows. Things I would never understand. Things she had tried so hard to keep hidden. The silence in the house was suffocating, and I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed to move. I needed to feel something other than this cold weight pressing down on me. I grabbed my keys and left the house, not sure where I was going. My mind was racing, every thought colliding with the next, trying to make sense of it all. Could I forgive Emily? Could I look at her the same way again after everything I had learned? The woman I had loved for years had carried a burden that I never even knew existed, and now I was left with the aftermath. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about Emily. It was about me too. It was about deciding whether I could live with the weight of her choices, or if I had to walk away from everything we'd built together. I ended up at the beach. The waves crashed against the shore, a soothing sound that should have calmed me, but it only made the chaos in my head louder. I walked along the water, feeling the cool breeze against my face, but I didn't feel peace. Instead, I felt lost in a sea of questions with no answers. I thought about the life we had shared, the kids, the anniversaries, the quiet nights at home, curled up on the couch together. Could I really throw all of that away? Could I leave her in the past, knowing that I would never see her the same way again? The truth was, I didn't know. I didn't know if I could go back to the life we had, knowing what I knew now. But I also didn't know if I could walk away from everything we'd built. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen for a long moment, debating. It felt wrong to keep running from this. I needed closure. I called Megan. Mark. Her voice was hesitant, as if she knew why I was calling. I need to know one last thing, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. How did Daniel really disappear? Did Emily? Megan interrupted. Mark, you don't need to know anymore. I told you what I could. Let it go. I can't. Not until I know the whole truth. There was a pause, and I could hear Megan exhale on the other end. Emily didn't just make him disappear. She arranged things. She paid people to make him go away. She thought she was protecting you, protecting the family. But she was always scared of him coming back. I felt my stomach drop. Megan's voice softened. She did it because she thought it was the only way. But Mark, Daniel's gone. For good. And Emily, she just wanted to move forward. She thought it was over. I closed my eyes, the weight of her words crashing over me. What did that mean for me? Could I move forward with the woman I loved, knowing the lengths she had gone to protect us? Or was this betrayal too deep to heal? The beach felt colder now. The answer seemed so simple, yet impossible. I spent the entire night walking along the beach, lost in thought. The world around me seemed muted, as if I were moving through it from a distance, watching everything unfold but unable to truly participate. The sky had darkened, and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore grew louder, almost deafening. But it didn't drown out the questions in my mind. Could I forgive Emily? Could I really look at her again and feel the same way, knowing the lengths she had gone to protect me, to shield me from a truth so dark it nearly broke us? She'd done it all out of fear of losing me, of losing the life we'd built. And yet, in trying to protect me, she had torn apart the very foundation of what we had. I thought about the kids. I thought about how, over the years, they'd seen us as a team, as partners. What would they think if they ever found out? Could they ever look at us the same way? Could I? I thought back to the life we'd shared. All those moments that now seemed so fragile, so easily shattered. Our anniversary dinners, our vacations, the quiet nights on the couch. I had loved her, completely and without hesitation. But now, love felt like something I was afraid to hold, afraid to touch. Felt too heavy, too complicated. I pulled out my phone, the screen glaring at me in the darkness. I thought about calling Emily, asking her to meet me, to sit down and talk. But what was left to say? What would I even ask her? Why didn't you trust me? Why didn't you let me protect you? Could I forgive her for keeping this from me all these years? For letting me live in ignorance, believing that our life was as perfect as it seemed? I knew in that moment that I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living in the limbo of knowing and not knowing. The silence between us, the things unsaid, had become too loud, too overwhelming. I needed closure. But closure wasn't as simple as asking for the truth. It was about whether I could find a way to live with the truth, whether I could rebuild something from the wreckage of our past. Could I forgive her? Could I forgive myself for not seeing the pain she had hidden? Could we ever go back to what we were, or was the damage too deep, too irreversible? The answer, I realized, wasn't something that could be found in words. It wasn't something Megan or Emily or anyone else could give me. It was something I had to find on my own. I took a deep breath and turned away from the shore, my feet dragging in the sand. The night was still. The world seemed still. But inside me, a storm was brewing. I had to choose whether to let it consume me or whether I could move past it, carry the weight, and try to rebuild. I didn't know the answer yet, but I knew one thing: this was the end of one chapter, and the beginning of something new. Whatever came next, I would face it alone, with or without Emily. And in that moment, I realized that maybe that was the only way forward.